So let's talk about the new assignment. It's going out today, and its focus is data model. We talked a little bit about it last week. Let's go over it some more. Well, on Tuesday actually, right? All right. So as always, there's going to be three levels of tasks. One that needs to be completed as an organization, one that needs to be completed as a team, and one that needs to be completed individually. As an organization, you're going to be asked to do a couple things. There's going to be 6 use cases overall that we're going to be taking a look at, and they're going to be split 2 use cases per team. Right? These are the 6 use cases of being able to either create a relationship between a service provider and a service provider and a service and a category, creating the frequently asked questions, be able to answer those questions, create specific questions for a service, and be able to manage the answers that folks have answered. Okay? And we're going to split them up in by teams. So team number 1 is going to deal with these two use cases. Right? It's going to deal with being able to associate service providers to services, meaning you have to be able to say, hey, this person, right, is a photographer, right? It's a chef, or they teach piano lessons. So you have to be able to create that relationship between a user and the service that they provide. And the other thing that they'll need to do is create the relationship between a service and the category that they belong to, right? Meaning, this person is a cook. That's a service they provide, and it could go under the category of weddings. Right? It's because they cook for weddings, or they do cakes, or they're photographers. Those are 2 services that might go under the wedding, right? Because they're both services that could be for that particular category. So we need to be able to create that relationship between a service and a category. Yes? So last week, you were working on being able to create an individual user, right? Or to be able to CRUD a particular service, or be able to CRUD a category. Yes? That was last week. So this week, you're going to have to work together, right, to create this relationship between all these things. Team number 2 is going to work with a brand new data model called the frequently asked questions. So you'll need to be able to CRUD frequently asked questions. Be able to create a new question saying, did you pass? How many folks do you have in your company? Since when are you in business? Have you passed a background check? So they'll have to be able to CRUD these frequently asked questions. Yes. So basically the same thing that you did last week, but with a brand new data model. Yes. Exactly what you did last week, but now we're giving you a brand new data model. So providers are going to have to answer these questions. Right? They're going to have to say, the providers are going to be able to answer saying, yep, I have 9 folks working for me. Yes, I passed a background check, and I've been in business since 1989. Right? So they're going to have to be able to answer those questions. Yes. So administrators are going to have to be able to CRUD those answers, right? Whether to flag them as inappropriate or edit them because for customer service, somebody might call and says, I can't change my questions. Can you please fix them for me, or whatever. As an administrator, I have to be able to find these answers and manipulate them. Yes? The other team number 3, it's going to deal with a brand new data model, just like frequently asked questions. This case is going to create questions for a service. Just like there's going to be a relationship between a provider has services, a service also has questions that are specific to that service. Right? For instance, yes, you are cleaning houses. A question for folks that clean houses is, well, how big a house can you clean? How many rooms? What size in square feet? Things like that. Right? So there are questions that are specific to the service. So administrators need to be able to add a question to a service, remove a question, change the title, change the description, make it either a multiple choice or make it a min-max or true false or whatever, right? And edit the question. Now, providers are going to have to answer these questions. Providers are going to have to be able to say, yep, I only do houses between 1,000 and 2,000 square feet, right? Or I only clean houses between 2 and 4 rooms. So administrators are going to have to be able to look at these answers, right? And perhaps even manipulate them, remove them, or add them, or just look at them. So Team 3 will deal with those types of things. All right. One of the things that we'll ask you to do is go into the SRS and basically just copy these titles as use cases. Just copy these titles and put them in section 3.2. We're not asking you to go in and describe the happy path or anything like that. Typically you would. Typically the business analyst would do this. We're not business analysts, so we're not going to do it. The business analyst would grab this and do the whole thing. Right? Would document these, and they would be the owners of the use case. Here we're only just going to record the fact that we're working in this use case, all right, and leave the business analyst to deal with that. Now, we're for the TAs to keep track of what you're doing. For every task that you'll be asked to create a story and assign it to the TA. For instance, this SRS. You'll create a story for the TA to come and look at the SRS, right, and review the SRS. And so the TAs are going to have a lot of work to do, right? So they're going to have a lot of things in their to-do list, and they'll work just like us, right? They'll move stories along as they complete these things. All right, so that's the first organization level task, right? Update the SRS as a team. The other thing will be that we're gonna start adding to the environment. Next week we're gonna yes.
So for the TA Jira task, is that like a story that should be TA creating some task that is that?
No, you create a story and you'll just assign it to them. Review the SRS documents.
But stories don't have tasks. Stories don't have tasks, right?
I meant just a story. A story.
The stories can be tracked from doing that. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. Yep. They can.
Stories don't only tasks yet.
No, stories. Stories can be yeah, stories can have subtasks.
Okay.
Yeah. And they would move along with the story. Yeah. Right. So next week we're gonna play around a little bit with yes. I thought there was a post showing the TAs assigned. Wasn't? Okay. If it wasn't, then all right. We'll share with you. Yeah. There's each TA will have about 5 or 6 teams associated. They'll have to be the same TA. Well, all TAs will be able to see them, but if there's one particular TA, we need to assign it to. There's one specific TA that is responsible for your particular team. So yeah, so we'll share that. I thought one of the TAs told me that they had shared that. Right, so next week we're going to play around with React towards Friday next week. But I need you to have the environment set up for that. Right? So as an organization, right, create a brand new React application. The basic out-of-the-box application is fine, and put it into a GitHub, deploy it to Heroku, and just share with us the URLs, right? And create a story, assign a story to your TA to come in and verify that GitHub and the React application, right? For them to come in and verify that it works. So those are the organizational level tasks. Right? For the teams, remember. Teams will only be responsible for the use cases that are assigned to them. They're not responsible for any of the other use cases. You might want to look at them, right, to just get an idea, but you're not responsible for any other use cases but your own, right, for that one team. So whatever these team level tasks, they're only specific to your 2 use cases that are assigned to your particular team. Right? So what you'll be asked to do is take the particular use case that was assigned to you as a team, right, and take a look at what functional requirements would you need to build that. Right, so we give you a couple examples. In this case, for the administrators, manage the service provider to service relationship. Then presumably you would need to be able to see all the providers, and then selecting a provider, and then being able to find all the services that you can add to that provider. Right? We need to be able to remove those providers, or maybe select all the services that you need to remove in bulk. Right? So these are just examples of what those functional requirements might be. Yes? We do it for you. This is Team 1, so Team 1 has almost this all done for you. So we ask you to please just create 5 stories, right, for each one of the use cases. So at the end, each team will have 10 stories. 5 for each use case. Yeah, so 5 for this use case and 5 for this other use case. Team 1 is already done. I gave them a whole bunch of them, and so they'll have it easier. But it's their implementation tasks are slightly more challenging. So we're giving you some help over here with some of these use cases already done. For the other 2 teams, we're asking you to do the same thing. Create 5 for one of the use cases and 5 for the other use cases. Yes? And for team number 3, 5 for this and 5 for, well, at least 5. You can create more. Right? You can create more. So at the end, the organization will have 30 stories in total. Yes?
So what's the interdependency between teams? You said there was a lot of it. I'm confused what that is.
So you have some folks were working on services and users and services and categories.
Services.
Yeah. So there's going to be some dependency there.
Do all the stories stay in the backlog?
I'm sorry?
Should all the stories stay in the backlog?
Yeah, they should all go in the backlog. You're not necessarily going to work on any of these this sprint.
And they should go in.
You're just going to fill the backlog. Right? It might be not even you who works on this. It might be some other team that's going to come and take over for you. Right? So we want enough backlog so we can start filling up the sprints as we go forward. Okay? Right. Usually this would be done by the project manager and the scrum master. Every week they meet. Right? They meet with the business, and the business gives feedback from the last demo. And says, I really like the demo. How about we do this, that, and the other? And they just fill the backlog with everything that the business just keeps telling them to do. Right? And asking for, and the business analyst and the project manager asking for priorities. Right, you're giving me all this to do. What do you want me to do first? Let's identify what we really need to do. Okay. All right. And depending on the priority that you set, they're continuously moving stories up and down in this backlog. And what bubbles up is what is potentially going to be going on for the next sprint. Yes. So this is a continuous exercise, usually referred to as the grooming. You groom the backlog, and they sit down for an hour or two, groom the backlog, looking for potential stories to work in the next sprint. Yes? Everybody okay? All right, so the backlog will be with at least 30 new stories, none of which you're going to work on in this sprint. The actual stories that you're going to work on are next. Right? So, each team member is going to work on just 2 stories, plus anything that you might have carried over from the previous sprint. You're going to work in 2 stories. One of the stories is going to be a design story. Right? Draw a class diagram, draw a sequence diagram. Okay? Right? So that's one of the stories. The second story is some implementation story. Build something. Build something that fulfills a particular feature. Right? So each student will work on just 2 stories. Okay? Right? A design story and an implementation story. Right. So the implementation story. So each team will have 3 implementation stories and 3 design stories. Right. So each student will have 1 of each. The implementation stories. There's 2 types of implementation stories which are fairly complex. One of them is create a Java model, create the Java class, create with all the setters and getters, create the CRUD for the Java repository that's going to connect to the database. So that's one type of implementation story. Or work on the RESTful service, right? Build a RESTful service that exposes that data model. Okay. So, for instance, I might work on the services side and the categories, right? Services and category, and there might be a one-to-many relationship. I need to build it. So I either create the Java classes, right, or the RESTful service that exposes that data model. You can choose. Right? You can decide as a team what do you want to work on. Right? Would I rather create the RESTful services with all the gets and posts and puts and deletes and all those URLs, yes? Right? You rather work on that? Or would I rather work on the Java model with all the dependencies of classes talking to one another and whatnot? Right? So you choose. But that's the implementation story. You're going to have to build that, code it. I'm going to give you lots of code as a sample. Right? So most of the code will be already given to you. So here are some examples of what the stores might be. For instance, the admin adds removes the service to from provider. That could be a story. Right? Or admin adds or removes the service to or from a category. That could be a story. Or admin CRUDs an FAQ, frequently asked question. Or an admin CRUDs a provider's answer to an FAQ. Or an admin CRUDs a question to a service. These are just examples. You can create your own, right, for that particular use case. A design story, again, there's going to be, each team is going to have 3 design stories, one per team member. Yes? And the design story can either be either build a class diagram or build a sequence diagram. You can choose, right? So, for instance, if you're going to build a class diagram, there are a couple of things. The class diagram has to contain a relationship between 2 classes. Maybe a provider to a service, or a service to a category, or providers to the frequently asked questions, or frequently asked questions to the answers, or some provider to the service questions, or whatever. These are some examples on what the class diagrams might deal with. Right? So you have to have at least 2 classes in your class diagram and show some interaction between them. Right? There's either a one-to-many relationship, or many-to-many relationship, or one-to-many relationship. Yes? Right? Some relationship between the 2. If you're working in a sequence diagram, you'll describe the relationship between a user sending an event to the browser talking to the service talking to a repo, the repo talking to the database, and then back and forth describing how the interactions occur. Yes? Right? Right, so create the stories and decide in sprint planning what is it that you're actually going to work. Obviously, no 2 people should work on the same identical story, right? There might be some dependencies between teams, between team members, right? Maybe I'm working on the services and you're working on the categories. At some point, we need to talk, right? Because a service is related to many categories. Yes, so there might be some dependencies there. So careful. You might decide that perhaps the same person takes both stories, right? That could be cool. No, we'll make it. It's better if each one works on a design and a implementation. Backlog grooming. So meet before sprint planning on what is that you're going to be building. Already told you to use those stories as the highest priority one. Sprint plan meeting. Make sure that you fill out all your meeting notes. Apparently, I just realized that your stories do not allow you to enter points. That the field.
You have to add them after the fact. So
It-
once you create the story, there's like you click on it. There's like
Oh, so you do see the field.
there's a field that says like
Oh.
defined or something. That you can like change that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, because somebody was showing me that they didn't see the story points, and I see them, but that person did not. Okay, so you can add them if it's not there.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Oh, but you have to create it first. Okay. All right. So so you can add the story points field. Yes. Okay. Yeah, we'll try to do that. So that's create. Yeah, I just learned that today that some students could not see the story points. Yes.
If we're requesting Jira like quality of life changes, the like default assignee behavior or automatic assigns it like the project owner. So when stories are created, if you don't change that, it will assign them all. Like for my example, for my team,
Yeah.
it assigns them to one person. But
Yeah.
For my team, so like.
Oh, okay.
A project owner can change it. They go to the settings. Okay. So.
Cool. Also, as I mentioned earlier, the interpretation of a point can be fairly subjective. A good rule of thumb is that one point might be anywhere between 4 and 12 points. I think some folks were considering interpreting a point as an hour, how many hours you're going to be working on. That's fine. If you want to be very, very granular or you want to be fairly coarse. This is more common, though, using a point as something fairly coarse as opposed to something extremely granular. Have your Scrum meeting every day. Even if you're not planning on doing anything that particular day, enter in your note meetings that you didn't do anything that day. That's fine. You have other things to do besides this course, but at least make that a habit of meeting at least 5-10 minutes in a Scrum meeting. And we suggest meeting at least twice a week, face to face. Perhaps the day that you have the class here in the lecture, right before class or right after class. That's a good time to meet. And that the other days, perhaps you can do a remote, either by email, text, or Hangout, or some other means of remote collaboration. All right. So those are team level tasks. Individually, you'll be asked to work on those stories, on that design story and that implementation story, right, that you created earlier. So here's some code that we're giving you as sample that implements some of the classes and relationship between these classes. For instance, between services and their categories, between users and the frequently asked questions, and frequently asked questions and the answers. So there's some source code that already can get you started here, or it can get you some ideas on how to do that. For the implementation story, you'll either work on a Java data modeling story, or you're going to be working on a RESTful services implementation. Yes? It's your choice which one you want to. Yes? Ideally, the design stories are based on the actual implementation story. So if you're implementing something, right, the relationship between a service and a provider, you would do the use case, not the use case, the class diagram or the sequence diagram for that implementation story. That would be the ideal.
Right, so it makes sense for have the design story and then have the implementation story back.
Yes, yeah, that would be the ideal. But folks can help each other. It's okay for folks to help each other, right? If somebody's blocked and you've completed a task, to jump in. But if you are helping each other, always make notes in the comments, right? That you are indeed helping somebody. So make sure that's in the comments. So your main communication should be using the comments. For the data model, for the data modeling story, we're asking you to create the Java data model. Where all the class fields, the constructors, the setters, the getters, and also any relationships that you might have from one Java class that has many of others, right? So you'll need to use these new annotations: one-to-many, many-to-many, one-to-one. Also, the repository. This will be all the queries that you'll need to implement some of the queries that you'll need to retrieve data from the database. So this will be some select statements, maybe some deletes, maybe some joins, right, that you might need to implement. I gave you some examples. Okay. Some of the CRUD, some of the repository functions you might need is, for instance, find service by IDs, find service category by ID, or find all services, or find all service categories by some other criteria, or be able to create a one-to-many relationship between child records and their parents. For instance, find all service answers for given a user, or find all the services that are in a particular category, right? Or find all the categories for a particular service, right? So functions that go across tables, that go across multiple tables. Also find all sorts of many-to-many. Find me all the services for a category. Oh, I mentioned that already. For RESTful services stories, you'll certainly need all the posts and gets and deletes for an individual class, which you already did last week. You already did post a new service, or delete a service, or find all service. You did that all last week, so that will need to be also implemented for FAQs and categories and all the other classes, all the brand new classes. You'll need to build that. But then you'll need also some services that go across multiple classes. So for instance, we talked about the services last Tuesday, right? And that RESTful services have a particular syntax for their URLs, especially if you have a relationship between class A and class B. Yes, right? Which is the case this week, right? So for instance, if you want to create a brand new review for user 123, you would post to users 123 and reviews. If you want to, if there is a review and you want to associate to a particular user, then you can say users 123 reviews 234. If you want to retrieve all the reviews for a given user, you can do a get. Or if you want to delete a particular review for a particular user, right, you would encode it using the URL. So this is what we talked about web services last Tuesday, yes? Your URLs need to follow a particular syntax. The RESTful syntax. For many-to-many is a little trickier, because many-to-many could be both directions, right? One service can be many categories, and one category can contain many services. So it could go both ways. So for instance, if you want to create a relationship between a service and a category, you could post and say, I want to create this service is now inside of this category. Or an equivalent might be that you post to a category for a particular service. These two queries are equivalent. You should choose one or the other. Or you might choose to do both. Right? For instance, it might make sense. Say you have actors that are acting in a movie, right? The way you would interpret, given this movie, which one are the actors, right? The URL would say, movies and then actors. But if you ask it backwards, what are the movies that this particular actor has been in, you might start with actors and then movies. Make sense? So decide which one you want to build. All right, so that's for the implementation story. For the design story, use tools such as Lucidcharts or Visual Paradigm or some other free UML diagram editor. For the design story, we're asking you to please prepend the name of the story with design. Put design in the title so that it sticks out. So, okay, this is the design story. Right, it's not an implementation story. And the diagram that you exported as a PNG or JPEG or whatever, attach it to the ticket. So upload the image to the ticket so that the TAs can then look at the image in the ticket. Make sense? Right. For the class diagram, classes should be between two classes, at least two classes. Have a particular, should have a relationship. It could be a one-to-many, a many-to-many, a one-to-one. It could be an association. Make sure you name the classes the same name that you're going to call the classes that you're going to implement. Make sure you provide all cardinalities, annotations, one-to-many, many-to-many, star-to-star, one-to-star, whatever. Name the associations. Right, so give names to the lines that associate the two classes. Use aggregate and composition. If it's one-to-many or many-to-many, if there's a life cycle dependency, right, that if I remove one, it doesn't remove the other, that's an aggregation. Or if it does remove, then it's a composition. Make sure to annotate it correctly. If it's a many-to-many, remember that if the many-to-many, if the class that relates to the other two classes has attributes, oftentimes we refer to it as an association class, and it has a specific UML class diagram way to draw it, right, with the line between the two classes and dashes to the association class. Right? Instead, if it says just a plain many-to-many, right, you'll need to reify it. Reify means to convert one line, right? Right, if it's something like this, A and B, many-to-many, this cannot be implemented in SQL. Right? So we ask you to reify it, meaning convert it to this. Like that, where you have one-to-many and one-to-many here. So a one-to-many converted into two one-to-manys. Yes? So going from this line to this is called reifying, right? Or creating a concrete representation. If it's an association, then it would be like that instead, with a dashed. Right, the difference here is that this one has no extra fields, whereas this one has extra fields. That's only the big difference between the two. Okay? JPA allows you to do both. You could do one or the other. Right? Allows you to do either. Sequence diagram, provide actors involved, classes or objects involved, the conditional loops, any conditional flows. Use guards to display that to enter that particular block, or any loops. Again, use guards to specify that you are staying within that loop as long as the guard is true. And here's just a list of the deliverables. I believe I have. Okay, I haven't done the individual level deliverables. I'll do that later tonight. Any questions?